Okay, so over in spray booth, you can probably see we've done the engine. So the engine, to be honest, we've just used a little bit of titanium, MRP 82 for that one. It's the first colour. We're going to come in and do some heat washes, usual things on that. But for the moment, that one is done. So what we got down in here, it's the main cockpit area. We've now installed the control sticks down in there. And to be honest, we have put the instrument panel in there as well, purely because looking at photos, although it is black and it's a different colour, it's very subtle because of the weathering. So I'm thinking it's probably going to be easier just to paint everything all in one. So for this particular one, pretty much everywhere on this, apart from the black parts, which we're going to pick out a little bit by hand afterwards, we're going to be using this. So this is MRP's 174, which is US Helo Drab, Federal Standard 34031. A very unusual colour, heavy on the pigment as well, so make sure it's had a good old mix up. Okay, so we just give it a bit of a tap round until all of that pigment at the bottom is gone, because obviously that's a important colour. Now this particular, obviously helicopter, like most of the military range, is solid everywhere in this particular colour. Okay, now I'm not sure about the engine area rounds about. Funnily enough, I can't find any reference for it. So for the moment, I'm just going to do everywhere in this. So it's going to act like a primer as well. And a little bit later, if we do find out we need to change colour, we can do that with no problems at all. But as you can see, very, very heavy on the old pigment down in here. So it is taking a good old mix to get this to go. Okay, pretty much there now. Okay, so haven't used this colour before. This is a new one on me. Okay. So it's basically like a dirty brown. It's very similar actually to a lot of ways to the Flory Models Wash Dark Dirt, because it's more of a brown than it is a black. Now the idea is this is going to go everywhere on this, and then we can come in with black to physically darken and for shading and everything else. So this is sort of almost like a post colour going down on here. So starting off very much everywhere, very light dusty coat. This is just to act like a primer. If you've never used lacquers before, this is what you're going to do just to get some paint down on here. Okay, now the whole point is we're putting this down first so we can come in afterwards with heavier coats to really colour in. So to start with, it's going to be very light. And then as we make our way through, it's going to get heavier, but without flooding it, because don't forget, lacquers do not like being flooded. It's one thing they dislike. Also, nice light coats. Now there's plenty of detail to get around in here, so if you notice it's getting a little bit light, shall we say, or a little bit wet, we're just going to cut to air now, just going to dry back. Okay, so we're now just deliberately trying to get in from all the angles. And this particular colour is one of those colours where the more you put down, the heavier it's going to get. But because you've got multiple angles to get it all round, you're just going to have to take your time, because otherwise it's going to be all too easy to flood an area. And as soon as this stuff floods, it's not going to be a good look. Okay. So as soon as you notice it's all looking a little bit wet, then back off. We're going to go somewhere else and we'll be good to go. Okay, so we're pretty much starting to take shape now. So we're just going to get a little bit more heavy, a little bit more creative in some of these areas. Okay, and as you can see, the thicker this paint goes, the darker it actually is going to get. Okay, okay, and we're just going to keep working it literally everywhere on this one. So I think if we hold it over here on this pylon, we can get in. So if we just finish off this front area, you can see the type of colour we've got. Okay, and that is how we're going with this one. So I'm going to carry on now, spraying this right the way over the entire thing. Okay, and then what we can do is once it's dried, we can come back, perhaps a little bit of post shading with some black. Again, we can airbrush it on just to go round and just to wear it in all these areas. But as you can see, it's one of those colours which is a little bit odd because it starts off very brown, and by the time you finish, you can make everything go black. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're going to do in here as well, because obviously this one comes at the back. That's going to be all that colour. The rear one, we're going to do it initially in this colour, but we might change it a little bit afterwards. But we're making sure it's got a good coat down on this one again, and then we'll come back with the black a little bit in a minute. Okay, so engine back on this one. So what we're going to do is just give it a little bit of burnt exhaust or exhaust metal colour. MRP's 148. We're not going to need tons of this. It's just a really nice little blue shade of colour. Okay, and this really is to go up inside, but to mainly just to give that sort of blued effect. So we're just spraying the inside out like there. And then what we're going to do is just fade it slightly. So we're just really spraying down the back end and then lightly up. So spraying the back end and then lightly up. So we're just trying to give it that heated type look. And then obviously what we're going to do just on the bends, just a little bit more, as if it's picking up the heat in that little zone. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just do these end ones again, as if it's just a little heated area, and perhaps just a little bit across the middles. Okay, just down in there, that's a little bit in there, and all we're just doing is trying to break it up. Now technically there's not a lot going on here, it's just doing a little bit of work down there. So we're just going to roll it around the back end, and really we're spraying the inside, but it's catching the outside at the same time, just to give an effect. Okay, and that is literally all we want to do. Another little quick blast in the back, and that's it. So by the time this has got a wash in it and is installed, and perhaps a little bit of wiring, it should look very much the part. But the nice thing about this exhaust colour, it's sort of got that blue hue to it, and in that way it just gives you that look and a breakup. So what we're going to do, let that dry, and then to be honest, we'll just come along with a simple enamel wash right the way over this one to brush all that one in. And then to be honest, these bits down in here, we're just going to come in and do a little bit of hand painting just on these, just for the metal areas, because obviously the back plate is going to be internals. But this little guy then, once it's done, will sit up on the back here, just like this. If we can get him in, that way around. That way around. There we go. So this little guy, as I say, we're all a little bit wet here, so just being a little bit careful. But that sits on the back, but then obviously we need to paint some of this up. So we've got a little bit of hand painting to do now, so we're going to go back over to the bench and we'll do that. Okay, so hopefully you can see we've got the black work hand painted down in there. So what we're going to do now is give it that clandestine black look right the way over it. So this is sort of the base colour, but what we want to do is sort of, you know, just bring it down and flatten it down and give it all those nice textures before we come in with dry brushing. So for that, good old fashioned rubber black. So this is Tamir's XF85. Okay, so we're going to mix this, quite a thin mix, because we're going to put it down at a bit more air pressure than we usually do. So we're just going to pop bit of thinners in here first. We're not going to need absolute tons of this, so what we're going to do is just going to grab a couple of brushfuls. Okay, so mix wise, this is probably going to be, I don't know, 75% thinners to paint, so it's going to be nice and thin, and that way we can spray it down and we can hopefully give it this more clandestine type look. Okay, so we've got to do in the back here. So we're just going to check our flow. My needle isn't set correctly, so when you pull the trigger, we're getting paint straight away. Okay, and that means just the needle needs to be seated again. So just literally pop your thing out and then seat the needle. That's good to go. Okay, so for this, what we're going to do is basically just going to pop around, higher air pressure, and we're just going to blow this over the top. And it's just going to act like a another coat, but it's going to be very thin. Okay, in some areas you might want to make go black, like we do this area here, so we can actually do that. Again, we've got a little bit of hand painting to do in there, so hopefully you can see the difference between the two. Okay, So that's good. We'll come back to that again in a minute. And then down in here, obviously we've done the cockpit and things like that. So we're just going to pop it around. Okay, and this is just a very light, thin, squiggly type blow absolutely everywhere on this. Okay, so we can still see various shades and things going on, but also we've got this new black coat being introduced right the way over this. So it's going to go down in the back now, and again in between these layers. Okay, and this is really just to break all this up. Okay, just trying to get in these boxes again like we did before. So you can see how it doesn't cover very well this, but it covers really well just over that darker colour. So we're just going to do in here, just so we get anything showing through. Just on the insides. Okay, and that's good. So that's all ready for dry brushing now. And again, we're just going to come with a quick second coat. Just around that area, just like that. And then this guy here, just back with this one. To be honest, we're just going to probably keep this as is and go in with a wash and the various things right the way over it. But there we go, that one's in now. So we're just going to flip this over and just do the undersides of the pylons. In those areas. On the other side. Okay, last little dance. Just a light dust right the way over. Okay. It's all looking very nice. To say, hardly used any paint to that as well. Okay, so that's really nice and straightforward there. Let that dry, okay, and then we're going to come in, we're going to dry brush the hell out of it to really make it pop. Then we're going to go in and do some instrument work, some picking out of details, things like that, and we go through. You might notice we actually haven't got the flight yoke handles, the cyclic handles on there yet, because they're going to break off, so I've left them off just for the minute. There we go, that's looking the part nicely. Okay, looking really nice, very much black now. Okay, maybe a little bit too much black, if I'm honest. Might have overdone it just a bit. So what we're going to do is start to lighten it up. I've got two colours down in here. Let's say two types of colours of dry brushing. You can see we've got the far lighter dual aluminium and we've got steel. Now steel's great to go with black because it's not over the top. It doesn't like eat into the effect too much. Okay, so as you can see, it's a nice dark colour. So usual thing with dry brushing, load up your brush. Okay, you're going to take obviously your cloth or tissue or kitchen towel, and we're going to load up twice. The reason I do it twice is so the bristles have got time to absorb and soak it in. It gives you a longer dry brush time. Okay, and then we've got them on here. So let's grab another piece just to stop it going everywhere. Okay, and then what we're going to do is to start with, because we've got plenty on here, you want to start with somewhere that isn't too noticeable, so forth and so on. So we're just going to start down on this ammunition drum because we're expecting it probably gets a lot of wear and tear where it's being removed, reloaded, removed, reloaded, and everything else like that. Okay, so we just start it in those areas. Okay, then we've got this fuel one behind, so again, same type of effect. Okay, and then really we're just going to work our way round everywhere, working towards the front. And remember, very light to start with, and as things start to, you know, sort of come into focus and whatnot, then you can, and wearing it off, and it takes a little bit more hard work, then you can move into other areas. So we're just going to start up here. I'm just going to very lightly, almost teasing at it, just around these more worn areas we're thinking. Okay, so we're definitely going to be getting a little bit of work here. Okay, and then we're going to start just encroaching into various areas. So we've got circuit breakers on the back here. That's obviously going to get quite a bit of work, as you can imagine, and down on here. And then obviously the box in between. All these areas down on here. On the front. And what we're trying to do is, by going over it with this metal, it's going to give it a metallic sort of effect and colour to it. What it does is basically add weight. It adds credibility to the paintwork. Okay, and because we've got some nice raised details down in here, we can see how we're slowly transforming it. Okay, and again, this is one of those things that don't keep loading at your brush. Use what you've got. Now it's wearing out, you can go to the bigger, flatter areas and start poking at it and scratching it, just to start to get it all to wear in. Okay, so we're just going to come around the bottom here. Now we've got, if you wanted to, depending on which way, if you're going to go powered down, you could go with this as all dark and cold and all the rest of it, and just come in literally like this with dry brushing. Okay, or you've got decals. Again, it's a personal choice with this. I think I'm probably not going to bother with the decals because they look horrible, but we'll take our cues from them. Okay, so we might pick out some colours, but we can come in this way, very, very subtle. Okay, so again, reload the brush, back down into the wet area, get rid of it all. And if you find you're a little bit worried, go somewhere where you're not even going to be seen and try and get rid of a lot of it down there. Okay, this isn't going to be seen. We can show our fingerprint, do a fingerprint job. Okay, and then once you're happy you've got a lot of that off, okay, then you can start going around. So very lightly in these work areas, things like this, just to start with. And then again, as the paint wears off, you can go in a little bit more heavy. So we're going to do some little scuff work. So we're just going quite over the top with the dry brushing, just where those feet and pedal would be. Again, plenty of pressure. Okay, and then let's see, we're going to run it around the front here. And what this basically does is just add depth to the entire model and just gives it all more credibility. Okay, because we're still going to come in this with washes and other things, so don't be too frightened to get in amongst it. Okay, don't forget this is sort of phase 1 dry brushing. We're going to have phase 2, phase 3 and all these other things, but this is what's going to turn it from looking black to actually making it look solid. Okay, so I say I just call it giving it credibility, but again, there we go. Hopefully you can see now how this is changing its look totally now, so it's got a good solid metal look to it all. But again, you know, you can even go over seats. Technically, you know, these aren't going to be metal, but it'll just add shine. It gives it weight, and again, it's more like credibility rather than dry brushing, because you're just trying to make things look solid. And now we've got that. Originally it was like flat black, now we've got a little bit of shine to it and everything that's going on, so we can show it probably even better on this little guy down in here, because obviously once we get in, you can power this over absolutely everywhere. Okay, and just make it look solid. Okay, something just like that. All right, so again, you can do it on this little guy back here, but to be honest, I'm probably going to change this up a little bit. So we're just going to come in, just going to grab a little bit of the color itself on this one, and we're just going to paint around on these. And again, if you haven't used these paints before, just remember light thin coats and then let it settle and dry. Okay. There we go. So that's a huge difference down on there, just like that. Okay, And then down here in the back again, we can start to come in with some more of a heavier look to it, just by using the steel. Okay, and then also we're just going to start to work our magic around these back areas because they are all going to be metal. And more of a solid look. Good. I'm not going to see much down in the backing of this, and that's why we can get in there and attack it just to dull it all down just like that. Okay, so that's pretty good. And then obviously you could dry brush if you wanted to over the engine as well, just to give this more of a heated metal look. And again, it's just catching the edges, making metals look hot and warm. So remember, you can always dry brush with anything. It doesn't have to be just normal paint. You can dry brush metals. And again, with a wash in there, it'll work really very, very nicely. Okay. So there we go. So hopefully you can see a massive difference now and how this is starting to pop and come to life right the way through, which I'm really happy of how that's looking now. All right. So what we're going to do, we can switch them. So that was the dark sort of steel. This one here is the lighter. So this is going to be one of those things where you're just going to use this very sparingly, because in contrast, this is almost like using white with black. Okay, it's a lot sharper color. So this is going to be edges, high gain areas, switches, things like that. Okay, so for this one, for instance, we're just going to lightly run it over the switches. This is all the circuit breakers. Okay. So just perhaps a little bit around these guys, and literally this is the very sparing one, because this is going to be a lot brighter. So perhaps if you want to do that scuffed floor, you could use this colour. It's going to be a lot stronger. It's going to be a lot more warm looking. Okay, and then again over these dials and areas. And then maybe, just maybe, a little bit just in the darker recesses, because it's going to be quite difficult to see these. And this will just make these stand out a little bit brighter. Okay. As I say, I don't want to do too much, because we don't want to just make it look too shiny. But that is literally all we're just trying to do to it, just to liven it up, just to bring it to life. And again, as it's drying, we can rub it round, just generally livening it all up. And there we go. So this little guy down in here, we know this base unit is quite silvery in comparison to the rest of it, so good old rub. As you can see, we've brought that to life. And then very lightly, just on these, just to lighten up some of these rear areas, which are going to be very dark, very hard to see, just down in there in the back, like that. Okay, and that's it. That's the other thing as well. Don't forget, multiple layers of dry brushing. When you look at it, you can see the difference. Okay, so then it shows up, because if you've gone everywhere with that bright one, it'd be really, really strong and you're not going to see too much at all. So what we can do is, now you've got an option. You can think, right, okay, we can come in here with a very thin type of like an oil wash, something else like that, to really sort of, you know, bring it in, to bring that dust effect in, stuff like that. And we're going to come in with washes, which we're certainly going to do. But what I'm going to do is actually do the inside of the fuselage halves now as well. Get those done, get those refined, get those weathered in and everything else like that. And that way we can do all the weathering with oils, pigments, and certainly a little bit of washes all at the same time. That way you don't have a thing where this looks slightly different to the outer sides. And when they come together, there's a distinct change, okay? So what we're going to do is going to repeat for the inside of the fuselage halves, as you can see down on here. So what we've got is these two fuselage halves. There's a few little holes to open up in here. There's obviously a lot of ejector pins we need to take care of. So we're going to sand, get rid of all of those, open up the holes, do exactly the same paintwork as we've done down in there, although we might just go straight with black with it because we're not going to see too much of it. Okay, and then obviously we're going to then dry brush exactly the same onto here, so everything is on the same page. Once that's done, we can think about actually installing the two halves together and bringing it on nicely.